Hello, and welcome back to Creepy Chronicles. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy Creepy Chronicles filled with spine-chilling horror, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now get comfortable. Dim the lights if you dare. Relax your mind. Let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story one, once upon a time, the narrator said, in a voice that sounded almost cheerful. The state accidentally assigned you to live with a serial killer. The narrator gave a soft little laugh, like it had told a harmless joke at a dinner table. And of course, everyone knows the system does not make mistakes. There was a pause. Not a real pause, because the narrator never truly stopped. It only left little spaces between its sentences, as if giving you time to agree. You should understand the context, the narrator continued. Citizen rehabilitation is one of humanity's greatest achievements. People with violent tendencies are paired with high empathy women who can help regulate dangerous behavior through supervised cohabitation. The living arrangement is controlled, monitored, and approved by the state. The goal is simple. Harmful citizens are given structure. Productive citizens are given purpose. Society becomes safer. Another small pause. The results had been excellent. That was what they told everyone. That was what they told you when your assignment letter came through the official apartment terminal on your 26th birthday. The message had appeared in calm blue letters, clean and perfectly spaced, with the state seal glowing at the top. It congratulated you for being selected. It thanked you for your service. It said you were going to play a meaningful role in restoring a damaged citizen to the community. Then it gave you his name. Marvis, his file was almost 32 pages long. You were not supposed to read all of it, but of course you did. Everyone did. The state said you were not being given a criminal as a punishment. You were being given a human being. A sick human being, yes. A dangerous one, yes. But still someone who could be shaped into something better. The file did not make him sound like someone who could be shaped into anything. There were reports of animal torture when he was young. Fire setting, assaults, 3 murders. One attempted mass shooting that had failed only because the weapon jammed at the wrong moment. Nearly every psychiatric label the state used had been attached to his name at one point or another. Violent personality disorder, antisocial behavior, dissociative aggression, predatory impulse instability, emotional deficit. The words went on and on until they stopped looking like descriptions and started looking like a wall built around him. His photograph was near the front of the file. He was thin, almost painfully thin, with a split lip and flat, dead eyes. His hair hung over his forehead in dark, greasy strands. He looked younger than you expected. Not innocent. Never innocent. But not powerful either. He looked like someone who had spent his whole life being hungry and angry and tired. When Marvis moved into your apartment, he arrived with 2 state officers and 1 small gray bag. The officers explained the rules. He would sleep in the 2nd bedroom. He would wear a tracker. He would attend daily correction sessions through the apartment terminal. You would log emotional changes, behavioral shifts, sleep quality, eating habits, and social responses. You were not to threaten him, insult him, or attempt physical discipline. Your role was to model calm human warmth. That phrase stayed with you. Calm human warmth. You tried. You made tea. You cooked simple meals. You smiled when he entered the room, because smiling was what people did when they wanted someone to feel safe. But Marvis flinched every time you smiled at him. At first you thought he was mocking you. Then you thought he was afraid of kindness. The files had said he came from a violent home. Maybe no one had smiled at him without wanting something from him. Maybe affection had always been followed by pain. That seemed sad, and because you were a good citizen, because the state had chosen you for your empathy, you felt sorry for him. Most men liked your smile. You knew that. Teachers had said it when you were a girl. Friends had said it. State workers had said it during your evaluation. You had the kind of smile that made people relax. But Marvis did not relax. He looked terrified. 6 months passed. At first, every day felt like walking around a sleeping animal. Marvis was quiet. He ate what you gave him. He did his correction sessions. Sometimes he sat in the living room and stared at the wall for hours. Sometimes he woke in the middle of the night and stood in the hallway, breathing hard, as if he had heard someone calling his name. Then came what the state called an emotional breakthrough. You found him in the kitchen one evening, sitting on the floor beside the lower cabinet. He was crying so hard his whole body shook. His face was wet, his nose was running, and his hands were clenched around something small. This was not considered unusual. The program was famous for these moments. The official guides described them as sudden collapses of defensive personality structures. In simpler language, dangerous men started crying because the apartment, the routine, and the presence of a gentle woman forced them to feel things they had buried. At least, that was the explanation. Marvis was holding a photograph. It showed a little girl on a swing. She was maybe 7 years old. Her hair flew back in the air, and her mouth was open in a bright, joyful laugh. A man's hand was visible at the edge of the picture, as if he had just pushed the swing and then taken the photo too late. Marvis stared at it like it had cut him open. "Who is this?" he whispered. You stood near the sink with a dish towel in your hand. "Well, you said carefully, you tell me." He looked up at you. His eyes were not dead anymore. They were full of something raw and helpless. "I don't know," his voice broke on the words. "But I know she's important," he said. "Very important." You sat down beside him on the kitchen floor. It seemed like the correct thing to do. It seemed human. You looked at the photograph again. "Maybe she's your daughter," you said softly. Marvis began to shake. The photograph had been hidden behind an air vent in the hallway. Marvis said he had heard something rattling there for days. When he removed the cover, the picture slipped out from behind the metal frame. On the back, written in messy, uneven handwriting, were the words, "Daddy and Ashley. Age 7. You checked the file that night after Marvis fell asleep at the kitchen table. According to state records, Marvis had never had children. He had never been married. He had never lived with anyone long enough to have a family. There was no daughter, no Ashley, no Haley, no child connected to him by blood, adoption, or guardianship. Nothing. The photograph disappeared the next day. You searched the drawers, the trash, the hallway vent, the space under the refrigerator, and every pocket of Marvis's clothing. He searched too, first calmly, then in a panic, then with a kind of blank despair. By evening, he had stopped talking about it. After a few weeks, he mostly forgot. Mostly, sometimes, in the middle of the night, he would wake up screaming a little girl's name. Haley. When you asked him about it, he said he had made the name up. He said it must have come from a dream. The state counselor agreed. The mind, she explained through the terminal, often invents symbolic children during rehabilitation. The lost child represents innocence. The violent citizen mourns the innocent self he destroyed. It was all very normal, she said. The narrator cleared its throat. Well, it said, a little too brightly, we should move on. 3 more assignments came after Marvis. Then 3 more after that. Then 4 more. Each one was a dangerous man. Each one came with a thick file, a gray bag, and a history that made ordinary people step back in fear. Each one was placed in your apartment because you were good at what you did. You were patient. You were calm. You smiled. You made tea. You asked gentle questions. You used the voice the training videos called non-threatening warmth. And each one, eventually, died. The first death was ruled a suicide. The second was an overdose, though you had no idea where he could have found the pills. The third died of cardiac failure, despite being only 34. One swallowed broken glass, so the state replaced all glassware in your apartment with plastic. Another drowned in the building pool, so the state drained the pool and sealed it with duct tape and warning signs. One pulled out his own teeth and bled to death before help could arrive, so after that, your assignments were given regular injections to reduce compulsive self-harm. The state reviewed each case. The state determined the deaths were connected to pre-existing psychiatric conditions. The state was satisfied. Each file was stamped closed. Then another partner was sent to you. You told yourself this was sad but not surprising. These were not stable men. These were not ordinary citizens. They had histories full of violence, fear, and broken thinking. The state reminded you that rehabilitation was difficult work. Not every citizen could be saved. Not every damaged mind could be repaired. You believed that. For a while. What nobody told you about dangerous men is that they are dangerous partly because they notice things other people refuse to notice. Patterns, cracks, repeated details, gaps in stories, strange coincidences. They look for weakness because weakness is what they understand best. Your sixth assignment became obsessed with old records. He spent hours at the apartment terminal, searching public archives and muttering names under his breath. Your ninth assignment cared only about missing persons reports. He covered the second bedroom wall with dates, faces, and strings of connection made from torn fabric. Your 12th assignment searched archived birth certificates until the state disabled his access. The 17th was smart enough to break into a government database. He was taken away for medical review the next morning and returned 3 days later with empty eyes and a tremor in his left hand. The 19th screamed for 3 days straight before cutting his own throat. The 21st left a message written in blood on the bathroom wall. You never saw it. The narrator interrupted. "That is not true," it said quickly. A pause followed. This one felt different. Thin, uneasy, please disregard that sentence. Your 24th partner lasted the longest. His name was Samuel. Samuel had murdered 41 people. That was what the file said, though even the state seemed unsure of the true number. He had confessed to some, denied others, smiled at the wrong questions, corrected investigators on small details only the killer could have known. His psychiatric profile was massive, exceptionally intelligent, extremely unstable, manipulative, emotionally detached, highly observant, dangerous under all conditions. The state expected him to die within 6 months. Instead, Samuel became fascinated by you. Not romantically. That would have been easier to understand. Men had become attached to you before. Some had mistaken your patience for love. Some had begged you not to let the state take them away. Some had whispered your name in their sleep. Samuel's interest was different. He studied you the way a scientist might study an illness. He started carrying a notebook everywhere. At first, you thought he was writing about himself, because that was what the rehabilitation program encouraged. Personal reflection, emotional tracking, accountability, but he was not writing about himself. He was writing about you. Dates, times, conversations, facial expressions. Questions you answered too quickly. Questions you refused to answer at all. He wrote down what you cooked, what songs you hummed, what books sat on your shelves, what photographs hung in the hallway, what stories you told about your childhood. One night, you found him staring at you from the armchair. You were standing near the window, folding laundry. The apartment was quiet. Rain tapped against the glass. The city lights outside looked blurred and far away. "What?" you asked. Samuel did not blink. "You don't remember anything before the age of 12, he said. You laughed a little. "Lots of people don't remember early childhood clearly. That is not what I said. You folded a shirt and placed it on the table. You don't have childhood friends, he said. You shrugged. So? You don't have former classmates. I was homeschooled. That is what you say." You looked at him then, really looked at him. Samuel sat very still, with the notebook open on his knee. His face was calm, but there was something bright and sharp behind his eyes. "You don't have a mother," he said. The room went silent. Not ordinary silence, not peaceful silence. The kind of silence that comes right before glass breaks. The kind that seems to fill your mouth and ears and lungs. Then you laughed. "Of course I do." Samuel slowly turned the notebook around. The pages were filled with information. Hundreds of notes. Interviews, government records, hospital records, school records, housing documents, photographs, diplomas, names, addresses, every piece of your life that he could reach, he had touched. Every claim you had made, he had followed. Your mother's name appeared again and again in the first half of the notebook. Then the record stopped. 6 years ago, every trace of her ended. Not because she died. There was no death certificate. Not because she moved. There were no travel records. Not because she changed her name. There were no name change documents. She did not disappear in the way missing people disappear. Every record proving she had ever existed had been erased, except in your memory. And even that memory was fading. The narrator cut in suddenly, louder than before. Samuel was profoundly delusional, it said, a diagnosed psychopath, a serial murderer, an unreliable person. His words should not be trusted. His conclusions were not based on healthy reasoning. The narrator's voice was still smooth, but something underneath it had changed. For the first time, it sounded nervous. You should not listen to him. Samuel vanished 2 weeks later. State officials came at 4:10 in the morning. You remembered the time because the terminal clock glowed above their shoulders when you opened the door. They told you Samuel had escaped during a medical transfer. They said there was no danger to you. They said the matter was under control. They praised your cooperation and advised you to rest. You believed them. Of course you did. At least for a while. Then you found the notebook. It was tucked under a loose floorboard in the second bedroom. You only found it because the board lifted slightly when you moved the bed to clean underneath. Samuel had wrapped the notebook in plastic and pushed it deep into the hollow space below. Inside was a list of 24 names. Every man who had ever been assigned to you. Marvis was first. Samuel was last. Beside each name were notes, dates, and final observations. Some pages were messy. Some were calm and careful. Some had stains you did not want to think about. But what mattered was not the notes themselves. It was the message. Each man had written it before death. Different handwriting, different pressure, different spelling mistakes, different levels of panic, but always the same words. She is not making us better. She is making us forget. Something cracked open inside you. It did not feel like remembering. Not at first. Remembering feels like finding something old and familiar. This was different. This felt like parts of your mind had been sealed behind a wall, and now water was leaking through the cracks. Images rose inside you. Birthdays you had never celebrated but somehow missed. Funerals where you had stood beside graves and wept for people whose names you could not keep. Faces, streets, rooms, entire years, entire lives. You saw a woman brushing your hair in a bathroom mirror. You saw a birthday cake with 12 candles. You saw a hospital bed. You saw a man laughing beside a red car. You saw a little girl on a swing. Ashley, Haley, maybe both, maybe neither. The memories did not return cleanly. They came like bubbles from deep water, rising fast, breaking at the surface, vanishing before you could hold them. But each one left behind a feeling: loss, fear, love, guilt, a terrible sense that your life was not a line, but a pile of broken pieces arranged to look like one. You looked around your apartment, and for the first time, you truly saw it. The decorations were not decorations. They were placeholders. The framed photos in the hallway showed you smiling beside people you did not know. The books on your shelves had cracked spines, but you had never read them. The coffee mugs had little jokes printed on them, jokes that did not sound like you. The blanket on the sofa, the painting in the kitchen, the postcards on the fridge, the childhood toy kept in a glass box by the window. All of it felt chosen by someone else, not a home, a manufactured life, a stage set, a place built to convince you that you had always been there. For the first time, the narrator stopped speaking. There were no jokes, no corrections, no cheerful explanations, no official language, only silence. A deep, heavy silence that made the apartment feel larger and emptier than it had ever felt before. You turned the final page of Samuel's notebook. There was only one sentence written there. It was not in the same careful style as the rest of his notes. The letters were uneven, almost rushed. You could not tell if it was meant as a warning, a confession, or a plea. Every person assigned to you eventually remembers what they lost. That is why the state only assigns you the ones nobody will believe. You sat on the floor for a long time after reading it. The apartment terminal glowed softly in the living room. Outside, traffic moved through the city. Somewhere in the building, a baby cried. Somewhere else, a television laughed. And slowly, the final understanding came. Samuel had not been trying to prove that the state had made mistakes. He had been trying to prove the opposite. The state knew exactly what it was doing. The 23 dead men before him had discovered pieces of the same truth. Marvis with the photograph. The 6th with the old records. The 9th with missing persons. The 12th with birth certificates. The 17th with the government database. The 21st with the message you were never allowed to see. They had not been sent to you because they needed rehabilitation. They had been sent because they were already noticing holes in reality. They saw patterns normal people ignored. They trusted their suspicion more than official explanations. Their minds were broken, yes, but sometimes a broken mind can see through broken things. After living with you, they noticed the biggest hole of all. You, not because you were a monster, not because you killed them, not because you wanted any of this, but because every time someone got close enough to you, someone else vanished. One life erased from records, one life removed from memory, one person traded for another. Payment, balance, cost. You thought of your mother. You tried to hold her face in your mind, but it slipped like wet paper between your fingers. You thought of Marvis crying over the photograph of the little girl. You thought of Samuel turning his notebook around in the rain-dark room. You thought of all the men who had come into your apartment carrying violence, suspicion, and damage, and had left carrying a truth too heavy for their minds to survive. The state had chosen them because nobody would believe them. If a serial killer said reality was being rewritten, who would listen? If a murderer said a woman's life was eating holes in the world, who would care? If a violent man died screaming that the system was stealing memories, The report would already be written before his body was cold. Pre-existing psychiatric condition. Case closed. New assignment approved. The narrator finally spoke again. Its voice was soft now, careful, almost afraid. Do you know why the state keeps assigning you serial killers? You did not answer. The apartment seemed to hold its breath. The answer is quite simple, the narrator said. Another silence stretched out, longer than any before it. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, it said, "They are easier to replace." Story 2. For 6 years, I drove Route 47. It was not a famous route. It was not one of those routes people complained about on the news or talked about like it was cursed. It was just a normal city bus route, the kind most drivers stop thinking about after a few months. It started at the downtown transit center, passed through the old industrial district, crossed the river, wound through a few quiet residential neighborhoods, and ended at a shopping center on the far side of town. Nothing about it stood out. Same streets, same corners, same traffic lights, same potholes, same people standing at the same stops at the same times every day. After a while, I knew the route so well that my hands seemed to turn the wheel before my brain even thought about it. I knew which light would turn red before I reached it. I knew which stops would have passengers and which ones would be empty. I knew which turns were too tight and which roads flooded during heavy rain. Some drivers said Route 47 was boring. I liked boring. Boring meant safe. At least that was what I used to think. The first strange thing happened on a rainy Thursday night in November. The weather had been bad since morning, but by the end of my shift, it had turned awful. Rain slapped against the windshield so hard the wipers could barely keep up. The streets shone under the traffic lights, black and silver, like they had been covered in oil. Water ran along the curbs in little streams, and every few seconds, a gust of wind shook the bus. By midnight, most people were already home. The city felt empty in that strange way it only does during bad weather, when even the usual night people disappear. The roads were quiet. Storefronts were dark. The few cars still out moved slowly, their headlights blurry through the rain. I was making my final loop before heading back to the depot. There were only 3 passengers left on the bus. One was a college kid wearing headphones, slouched in his seat with his hood pulled up. Another was an older woman holding several grocery bags close to her feet. The last was a man sitting all the way in the back. I did not remember him getting on. That was not enough to scare me. Drivers miss things all the time. You are watching traffic, checking mirrors, collecting fares, answering questions, keeping an eye on passengers. Sometimes someone gets on while you are distracted, and you only notice them later. But this man caught my attention because he never moved. Every time I looked into the rearview mirror, he was sitting in the exact same position. His hands rested in his lap. His back was straight. His head faced forward. He was not looking out the window. He was not using a phone. He was not sleeping. He did not shift, scratch his face, cross his legs, or glance around. He just sat there. Still, I told myself he was tired. Maybe he had worked a long shift. Maybe he was drunk. Maybe he was one of those people who could sit quietly for a long time without moving much. The route continued like normal until we reached Maple Street. The older woman pulled the cord and got off first, struggling with her grocery bags as she stepped into the rain. A few stops later, the college kid left too. He gave me a quick nod before jogging toward the sidewalk with his headphones still on. Then, it was just me and the man in the back. I glanced in the mirror again. He was still there. Same seat, same posture, same empty stare. A few minutes later, I reached the final stop at the shopping center. The place was closed for the night. The parking lot was completely empty, except for puddles and a few shopping carts lying on their sides near the entrance. The big store signs were dark, and rain moved across the asphalt in sheets. I pulled into the turnaround area, stopped the bus, and opened the doors. Last stop, I called. The man did not react. I waited a few seconds, then called again, louder this time. Last stop. End of the line, still nothing. I sighed. I was tired, wet, and ready to get back to the depot. I set the parking brake, stood up, and walked down the aisle. The bus felt different as I moved toward the back. I cannot explain it exactly. It was still the same bus, same wet rubber smell, same dim lights overhead, same soft rattling from the engine, but the closer I got to him, the heavier the air seemed to feel. Then I reached the back row. The seat was empty. I stopped. For a moment, I just stared. The man was gone. There was nowhere he could have gone. The bus had only one exit, and I had been sitting right beside it. I would have seen him leave. I would have heard him step down. The windows did not open wide enough for someone to climb out, and there was no hidden door or hatch. I searched the entire bus, every seat, every corner, under the seats, behind the rear bench. Nothing, no man, no bag, no wet footprints, no sign that anyone had been sitting there at all. I stood alone in the aisle, listening to rain hammer the roof, trying to make sense of what had happened. After a minute, I told myself I was tired. Maybe he had slipped out behind the older woman or the college kid, and I had only imagined seeing him afterward. Maybe I had been watching reflections in the window. Maybe the rain and low visibility had messed with my eyes. The next day, I tried to forget about it. For almost a week, I did. Then it happened again. Same route, same late-night shift, same miserable weather. Just after midnight, I checked the rearview mirror and saw him sitting in the exact same seat. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. He wore the same dark jacket, same work boots, same plain, tired face. His hands rested in his lap. His body was still. He stared straight ahead. This time, I knew he had not boarded. I had been watching every stop carefully because of what happened the week before. I checked the doors every time they opened. I watched every passenger who got on and off. I knew for certain that this man had not stepped onto my bus. And yet, there he was. At the end of the route, I opened the doors and called out. Last stop, nothing. I walked back, slower than before. By the time I reached the rear seats, he was gone again. The third time he appeared, I started asking questions around the depot. Most of the other drivers laughed it off. They told me I was working too many late shifts. One joked that Route 47 was finally giving me brain damage. Another said every bus driver eventually sees ghosts if they drive long enough at night. But one older driver did not laugh. His name was Frank, and he had been working for the transit company longer than anyone else I knew. He was usually quiet, the kind of man who drank black coffee and kept his opinions to himself. When I described the man in the back of the bus, Frank's face changed. He went still. Then, after a long silence, he asked, "Does he sit on the left side near the back?" I nodded. The color drained from his face. He stood up and walked out of the break room without saying another word. That scared me more than the man did. A few days later, I found Frank alone in the break room and pushed him to tell me what he knew. At first, he refused. He told me to drop it, to keep driving, and to stop looking in the mirror so much. But I would not let it go. Finally, he sat down and rubbed his face. 20 years ago, he said, Route 47 used to run a little differently through the industrial district. I sat across from him and listened. He told me there had been an accident, a bad one. A driver named Carl had been operating the final run of the night when a drunk driver ran a red light and slammed into the bus at high speed. Several passengers died instantly. Carl died too. One of the victims had been a factory worker heading home after a double shift. According to the accident report, his body was found in the rear left section of the bus, the exact seat where my passenger always appeared. I did not want to believe it. Every workplace has ghost stories. Hospitals have them. Hotels have them. Old office buildings have them. Bus depots are no different. Drivers spend too much time alone at night, and people start making things up. A weird sound becomes a dead passenger. A flickering light becomes a warning. A bad feeling becomes a curse. That was what I told myself. Still, after that conversation, I watched the mirror more than ever. The next time the man appeared, I studied him carefully. He looked completely ordinary. Middle-aged, short hair, dark jacket, work boots. Nothing about him seemed rotten, burned, bloody, or supernatural. He did not look like a ghost from a movie. The only strange thing was his expression. He looked sad. Not angry, not evil, not threatening. Just deeply sad. His face never changed. Weeks passed, and then things became worse. One night I looked in the mirror and saw that the man was not alone anymore. A woman sat beside him. I had never seen her before. She looked nervous and exhausted, with her hands folded tightly in her lap. Her hair was damp, though I had not seen her come in from the rain. Her eyes stared forward, just like his. Neither of them moved for the entire ride. When I reached the final stop and walked toward them, they both vanished before I got to the back. After that, more passengers began appearing. 3 one night, 4 the next, then 6. They always appeared without boarding. They always sat in the rear half of the bus. They never spoke. They never looked at me. They never pulled the stop cord. They never reacted to anything happening around them. And every time I reached the final stop, they disappeared before I could reach them. By Christmas, nearly half the back of the bus would sometimes be occupied. Nobody ever noticed, except me. Real passengers would sit near the front, scroll on their phones, talk quietly, or stare out the windows. None of them looked back. None of them asked why so many silent people were sitting behind them. It was like those passengers were only visible to me. What bothered me most was not their sudden appearance. It was their faces. Every one of them looked tired. Not normal tired, like people coming home from work. They looked defeated, anxious, hollow, like they were all waiting for bad news they already knew was coming. Eventually, I stopped telling coworkers. Nobody believed me anyway, and I was afraid if I kept talking, management might decide I was not fit to drive. Then, January 17th came. I remember the date because after that night I wrote it down and circled it 3 times. A heavy fog had settled over the city after sunset. By midnight, it was so thick that the streetlights looked like weak yellow balls floating in the air. The road ahead disappeared after a few yards. Even with the headlights on, I could barely see past the front of the bus. I was halfway through the route when I checked the mirror and nearly slammed on the brakes. Every seat in the rear half of the bus was full. At least 20 passengers sat silently behind me. The first man was there in his usual seat. The nervous woman was beside him. Others filled the seats around them. Men and women, young and old, a few in work clothes, a few dressed like they had been coming from the store or heading home after a night out. All of them still, all of them silent. The atmosphere inside the bus felt wrong. Usually buses are never truly quiet. There's always the engine, the heater, the tires, the frame shaking, the little squeaks and rattles that come with an old vehicle. But that night, those sounds seemed far away, muted, like the bus had been wrapped in thick cloth. I kept driving. A few blocks later, the stop request bell rang. The sound almost made me jump out of my seat. For months, those passengers had never touched anything. They had never moved, never spoken, never reacted. But now, the sign above me lit up. Stop requested. My body responded before my mind did. I pulled over and opened the doors. Nobody got off. I looked in the mirror. All the passengers remained perfectly still. Then the bell rang again. I swallowed. It rang again, and again, and again. The sound echoed through the bus, sharp and relentless. I looked back into the mirror. Every passenger was staring directly at me. For the first time, they were not facing forward. They were looking at me. My skin went cold. Then, one of them slowly raised an arm and pointed toward the windshield. I looked back at the road. A city bus sat directly ahead in the middle of the intersection. Its lights were off. Its engine looked dead. It blocked the entire road. I slammed on the brakes. My bus stopped less than 10 feet away from it. For a moment, all I could hear was my own breathing. Through the fog, I could see that something about the bus ahead was wrong. Its shape looked older. The paint scheme was outdated, like buses from old photographs. The windows were dark, but I could see shapes inside. Every seat looked occupied. Then I saw the route number. My stomach dropped. It was not another bus from our current fleet. It was the old Route 47, the one from the crash 20 years earlier. The dead bus sat motionless in the fog. Its windows were black. Its doors were closed. Its passengers were shadows. Then I saw the driver standing beside it. He wore a transit uniform. As the fog shifted, I recognized his face. Carl, I had seen his photograph at the depot. It hung in a hallway with old employee pictures, one of those framed memorials most people walked past without reading. Carl was not looking at his own bus. He was looking at mine. Then he slowly shook his head. Just once. Immediately, the stop request bell inside my bus began ringing non-stop. I looked into the mirror. Every passenger had stood up. Every one of them pointed toward a side street branching off from the intersection. I did not think. I turned the wheel. The bus lurched down the side road. Seconds later, a tractor trailer burst through the intersection at full speed. The driver never hit the brakes. The truck tore through the exact spot where my bus would have been if I had kept going straight. It moved so fast that the wind from it shook my windows. If I had stayed on the route, it would have hit us directly. The truck vanished into the fog. I sat there, frozen behind the wheel, my hands still locked around the steering wheel. I could not breathe. My chest felt tight. My heart hammered so hard I thought I might pass out. After a while, I forced myself to look back toward the intersection. The old bus was gone. Carl was gone. The road was empty. Then I checked the mirror. The passengers were gone, too. My bus was completely empty. The next morning, the police reports confirmed part of what happened. A truck driver had suffered a medical emergency near the industrial district around the exact time I was there. He lost control of his vehicle and went through the intersection at high speed. Investigators later said that anything entering that intersection would almost certainly have been struck. I never told management the whole story. What was I supposed to say? That dead passengers rang the stop bell until I listened? That a dead driver appeared in the fog and warned me not to continue? That the victims of an old Route 47 crash saved my life? Nobody would have believed me. But after that night, something changed. The passengers still appear sometimes, but not often, and never in large numbers anymore. Usually, it is only one or two. They sit quietly in the back, ride for a while, and disappear before the final stop. The man in the dark jacket still shows up every few months. He always wears the same work boots. He always sits in the same rear left seat. But now, when I catch sight of him in the mirror, he is no longer staring sadly into the distance. Now, he smiles. And every time I reach the final stop and turn around to look, he is gone. Story 3. Are you satisfied? Are you satisfied now? I want to ask you again, because I do not think you heard me the first time. Are you satisfied now? No, wait, let me start again. I am speaking too quickly. I am letting my anger get ahead of me, and that always makes people nervous. You people already think we are animals. You already think we cannot control ourselves. You already think every word out of our mouths is a threat. So let me go back a little. Evil, that is what you call us. We evil people would like to ask you something. Are you satisfied now? Because we know you are. We can feel it. You sit behind your glass, behind your locked doors, behind those desks with files stacked higher than your heads, and you pretend you are doing something good. You pretend this place is protection. You pretend Redwood was built to keep the world safe from monsters like us. Maybe it was. Maybe that is what it was supposed to be in the beginning. But you went too far. I remember standing in court. I remember the lights. I remember the wooden benches full of people staring at me like I was not a man anymore. I remember the crying. I remember the cameras outside. I remember how quiet the room became when they read the names. Then they asked me why. Why did you do it? That was the question everyone wanted answered. They leaned forward like they were waiting for some deep reason, some sad childhood, some broken piece inside me, some story that would make the killings make sense. I looked at their faces, one by one. The judge, the lawyers, the families, the officers standing near the walls, the reporters trying not to look too excited. I watched their eyes, and I felt my grin widening before I could stop it. My lips twisted upward, slow and calm, because the truth was simple. I had been fooling around. That was all. I know I was not allowed to say it like that. I know people do not like when men like me speak plainly. They want big words. They want diagnoses. They want terms that make them feel safe. They want someone in a clean shirt to stand up and say I was damaged or sick or born wrong. But I was just playing. I did not think they would call me evil. Monster, devil, all those little words people use when they want to separate themselves from what scares them. I sat there and listened to them spit those words at me, and I let them. Then I waited for the officers to collect me and drag me away to my new home. Redwood, that satisfied me. For a while, it really did. Redwood was full of people like me, men who had done things so bad the outside world could not even look at them for too long, men whose files were locked in heavy cabinets, men whose names made guards change their voices when they said them, men who had been studied, questioned, tested, and judged by doctors who thought evil could be measured with ink blots and soft chairs. That was our world. Concrete walls, steel doors, cameras in every corner, lights that never went fully dark, guards who watched us as if a blink might get them killed, psychiatrists who spoke gently because they were afraid a harsh word would make us bite. You made this place for us, and we accepted it. But then you brought him here. That is why I am asking again. Are you satisfied now? Because we all know what happened to the new inmate. Do not pretend you do not know. Do not act like this is one of those little rumors that crawl through the vents at night. There was no rumor at first. Nobody told us what he had done. Nobody whispered his crime. Nobody passed the name from cell to cell. Nobody said whether he killed one person or 10, whether he used his hands or a knife, whether he laughed, cried, prayed, or stayed silent afterward. Nothing. He just appeared. Maybe you watched the cameras that day. Maybe you stood behind the glass and checked the hallway near the end doors. If you did, then you saw me. You saw me seething. I could not believe it. How could there be another one? We had already gotten new ones last year, 2 of them. Loud men at first, but quiet after a few weeks. That is how Redwood works. The place takes the voice out of you eventually. It scrapes it out with boredom, locked doors, and the sound of your own thoughts bouncing back at you. But then there was one more. He was tall, built strong, packed with muscle, but not in the way men build themselves in prison yards. His body looked heavy, like it had been made for work. His face was grim and pale. His dark hair hung around his head in a thick flow that looked almost rotten, like it had been wet for too long. At first glance, he almost looked like me. Almost. That was the part I hated. The only clear difference was that he was quiet, not normal quiet, not scared quiet, not angry quiet, empty quiet. Most of us are quiet in here, at least after a while. But silence means something different inside Redwood. On the outside, quiet people are easy to ignore. In here, the quieter you are, the more people watch you. A loud man is usually showing you everything he has. A quiet man is hiding something. So we watched him. And because he was quiet, we saw him as a threat. That is how things work around here now. You know that. You made this place. You should know the rules better than anyone. Still, I kept asking myself the same question. How could there be one more? You all spend so much time worrying about what happens inside Redwood. You watch the halls. You count our meals. You check the locks. You write reports when one of us smiles at the wrong time. But have you ever stopped and asked what is happening outside? Have you ever wondered why men like us keep arriving? Have you ever wondered what the world is making out there? When they introduced him, we all felt the same thing. Unsatisfied, that is the only word I can use. It sat inside me like a bad taste. I looked at him, and something about him did not fit. It was not fear. I do not fear men. It was not anger either. Not at first. It was more like seeing a picture hanging crooked on a wall. You know something is wrong before you understand why. I nearly took my fists out right there. Actually, I did more than nearly. I broke his nose. Or at least I tried to. You people acted like I was the threat. You grabbed me. You shoved me against the wall. You shouted my name. You told me to stop. You dragged me down before I could finish what I started. Then you threatened me with solitary like I was a dog that needed a smaller cage. Pathetic. Real pathetic. Because the more you degrade us, the more you look at us like we are the sinister ones, the more you should remember why we are all here. Take out our files. Go on. Read the names. Read the dates. Read the charges. Read the statements from the families. Read the photographs if your stomach can handle it. Read the reports from the police officers who found what we left behind. Read the notes from the psychiatrists who sat across from us and tried to find a human reason for inhuman acts. I know I am the worst name on that list. I know that. I am not pretending to be innocent. I am not asking for mercy. I am not saying I was misunderstood. I know exactly what I am, and so does everyone else in Redwood. But then I want you to take a long, careful look at his file. His file, the new inmate. Look at ours, then look at his. Find the difference. And no, 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 we are not playing games with you. We are not setting traps with words. We're not trying to make you nervous for fun, even though I will admit that is tempting. We just want to be sure. Because we know what happened to the new inmate. We all know. A psychiatrist could talk for hours about trauma and the mind of a serial killer. They could talk about psychopathy, rage, childhood, control, shame, desire, and every other word they use when they want horror to sound clean. Talk to the doctor here if you want, the one with the soft voice and the tired eyes. He can tell you the same thing they tried telling me during my hearings. Either people are born evil, or they are made evil. That is what they said. Some people loved the first idea, born evil. It made them feel safe. It meant I was never like them. It meant I came into the world broken, already wrong, already separated from the good people. It meant they did not have to ask how close they might be to becoming something like me. But I do not fully believe that. Maybe some people are born damaged. Maybe their brains are shaped wrong. Maybe their mothers drank too much or swallowed pills while carrying them. Maybe something bad happened before they even opened their eyes. But that is not the same as being born evil. Then there is the other idea, made evil. That one is just as weak. People love it because it turns monsters into stories. It gives everything a beginning, a bad father, a cruel mother, a locked room, a schoolyard, a beating, a dark basement, something that explains the first step. But pain does not always become murder. Plenty of people suffer and never become us. Plenty of children are hurt and never grow up to hurt others. So that idea falls into the same hole as the first one. Born evil, made evil. Both of them fail, at least for me. But inside Redwood, I have seen both sides play their little parts. I have seen men who looked empty from birth. I have seen men who had something carved into them by the world. I have seen men who killed because they loved it. Men who killed because they needed it. Men who killed because it was the only time they felt real. We are not all the same, but we are all evil. And that is why what you did makes no sense. You placed the new inmate among us as if he belonged here. You opened the doors and let him walk into Redwood as if he was another name for the list, another monster for the cages, another devil for the devils. But we knew the truth, all of us did. Evil knows evil when it sees it. We feel it. We smell it in the air. We hear it in the silence between words. We see it in the way someone looks at another living thing. It is in our nature now. There is no changing back from that. So when you put him inside Redwood, you thought we would accept him, but we did not. Because he was not evil like us. That is what you still do not understand. He was something else. And then a few days later, he got knocked down. You sounded the alarms. You ran through the halls. You shouted orders. You locked us in our cells. You sent me to solitary like darkness and silence could make me forget what I had felt. You thought scaring me would be enough. You thought I would sit in that little room and let the truth rot inside my head. But I did not forget. None of us did. Because we overheard what was said that night. You should really train your guards better. It was probably the short, big-mouthed one. The one who patrols the halls while we sleep and talks too much because he thinks the doors make him brave. He was standing near the far end, by the doors. I think the black guard was with him, the quiet one who always checks the locks twice. Look through the cameras. You will see them. They were talking, not loudly, but the vents carry more than air in this place. Voices slide through these walls when the night is quiet enough. We have nothing to do in here but listen. At first, I only heard pieces. Noticing, that was the word. Noticing, noticing, noticing. The word kept flashing in my mind. It spun around in there like a loose screw. What were we not supposed to notice? What were they scared of? What could be so obvious that even men locked away from the world might see it? Then I heard it clearly, word for word. I hope the devils don't notice, that is what he said. The devils. That meant us. I hope the devils don't notice. Do you understand how stupid that sounds? You locked us away from the outside world and thought that would make our senses dull. You thought concrete could make us blind. You thought steel doors could make us stupid. You thought because we are criminals, because we are killers, because we are the worst things the world has to offer, we would not notice something standing among us that did not belong. But we noticed. Of course we noticed. Why do you think I attacked him? Yes, I like violence. I will not lie. I would beat a man for fun if the mood took me. But that day was different. Breaking his nose was not the point. I was not playing. I was trying to prove something to myself before my own mind could talk me out of it. And when my fist hit his face, I felt it. Not bone, not the way it should have felt. There was resistance, yes, there was flesh. There was the sound of impact. Blood came out, or something close enough to blood that the guards believed it. But underneath that, there was something wrong. Layered, thick, deep, like hitting a wall covered in meat, like there was too much body behind the face. I have hurt many people. I know what a person feels like when they break. He did not feel like a person. My fists nearly cracked from the pressure. Pain shot through my knuckles, and for a second I thought I had punched concrete. He stumbled back, but he did not react right. He did not curse. He did not spit. He did not look shocked. He only looked at me with those flat eyes, as if he was waiting to see what I would do next. That was when my feelings got hurt. And you know what happens when my feelings are hurt. I start to seethe. I have never felt anything as layered as him. Out of every man inside Redwood, every killer, every butcher, every smiling thing with a human name, I have never felt anything more unsatisfying than that new inmate. So now I am thinking, really thinking. This was a setup. It had to be. You can stop sounding alarms now. You can stop pretending this was normal. You can stop rushing around with your keys and radios like you are still in control. Did you put him here because the devils noticed? Did you bring him in because you wanted to see if we would react? Did you know we could sense something wrong with him before your machines could? No, that is not the right question. Let me ask it better. Did you know he was not entirely human? No, wrong word. Human is a dangerous word in a place like this. You use it for us when it helps your reports, and you take it away from us when it helps you sleep. So let me say it the way we understand it. Did you know he was not evil? Not like us. Because we all know why we are here. We know what we did. We know what lives inside us. We know evil more clearly than anyone on the outside ever could. We are surrounded by it. We breathe it. We wear it. We wake up with it and sleep beside it. And that man did not have it. Not the way he should have. He was not empty because he was calm. He was empty because there was nothing behind him that belonged to a man. He was not hiding a crime. He was hiding a shape. Maybe that was what you wanted. Maybe you wanted to drop him into our cage and wait for the animals to sniff him out. Maybe Redwood is not just a prison anymore. Maybe it is a test site. Maybe we are not only inmates now. Maybe we are tools. That would be clever. Cruel, but clever. Or maybe you did not plan any of this. Maybe the big-mouthed guard was not meant to send us a message. Maybe he was not warning us. Maybe he was warning himself. Maybe he said too much because he was scared. Maybe none of you know where the new inmate came from. That thought is worse, because if you do not know, then no one knows. Maybe that is why the blonde man keeps shivering when he shows us the files. You know the one I mean. The man with the neat tie and the shaking hands. He stands in front of us and tries to speak like he is in charge, but his fingers tap the folder until the paper bends. He does not look at the new inmate's file for too long. He turns pages quickly, like the words might crawl out if he reads them slowly. The file has information, yes. A name, a date, a place, a crime, maybe, but information is not truth. You can write anything in a file. You can call a thing an inmate. You can give it a number. You can dress it in prison clothes. You can walk it down our halls and put it behind a steel door. But that does not make it one of us. We know evil. We know it better than you. And he is not evil. That is why we are afraid. Do you understand now? Do you understand why this is not some little prison fight? Do you understand why even men like us have stopped laughing? Men who once smiled while families cried are now listening at their doors. Men who never prayed before are whispering at night. Men who used to threaten guards for fun are asking to be moved away from his cell. Because whatever he is not like us. And if even the devils can feel that something is wrong, then maybe you should stop asking what we did to him. Maybe you should start asking what he is doing to us. You think we are monsters. Fine. Keep thinking that. Lock us up. Study us. Hate us. Use every name you want. But remember this. When monsters start warning you about something in the dark, you should listen. Because we all know what happened to the new inmate. We all know he was knocked down. But none of you are asking the real question. Why did he let me hit him? Why did he bleed only after the cameras turned toward him? Why did his nose look broken in the footage, but look perfect the next morning? Why did 3 men in the South Block start screaming in their sleep after he passed their doors? Why does the air near his cell smell like wet earth after rain, even though there are no windows down there? Why do the lights flicker only when he is standing still? Why do the guards keep forgetting his face? And why, when I looked at him after they dragged me away, did he smile at me with my own mouth? You see, that is the problem with you people. You built Redwood for devils, but you opened the door for something worse. And now you do not even know what he is. Story 4. I work as a field technician out of Phoenix for a microwave communications company. Most people do not really know what that means when I say it. The easiest way to explain it is this. I spend a lot of my work life driving to places where machines are supposed to talk to other machines. Cell towers, radio sites, relay stations on mountains, equipment shelters in the middle of nowhere. If one system stops sending a signal to another system, there's a good chance someone like me gets sent out in a truck to see what went wrong. It is not as exciting as it sounds. Most days are just long roads, hot weather, locked gates, dusty equipment cabinets, and hours of checking things that usually look almost exactly the same. I might spend 5 or 6 hours actually working, but that work is usually wrapped inside 4 or 5 hours of driving, sometimes more. You learn to live with it. After a while, the road becomes part of the job, and the job becomes part of the road. Arizona has a way of becoming invisible after you drive through it enough times. People who have never spent much time in the desert think it must always look beautiful. And it can. There are sunsets that make the whole sky look like fire. There are mountains that look purple in the distance. There are places where the silence feels almost holy. But when you drive through the same kind of land day after day, the details blur together. Tan dirt, scrub brush, dry washes, distant ridges, long highway, heat rising off the road, more scrub brush, more dirt, more sky. It starts to feel like the world is repeating itself. That is why I usually kept the radio on. I did not always care what was playing. Half the time, it was just background noise. Music, commercials, some DJ talking too much, traffic reports that did not matter to me because I was usually already far outside the city. It kept my brain from going completely dull during the long stretches. This happened in June. It was one of those days where the heat seemed to come up from the ground and press down from the sky at the same time. I had been sent up near Flagstaff for a domestic install, and the job took longer than it should have. That was nothing new. Jobs always look simple on paper. And then you get there and find some bad cable, a missing part, a locked access panel, or a customer who swears something worked yesterday even though it clearly had not worked in years. By the time I finished, packed up, and got back on the road, it was already about an hour before sunset. I was heading south on Interstate 17, back toward Phoenix. I knew that drive well enough to do it half asleep, which is not something I am proud of, but it is the truth. I had driven that road so many times that every curve and grade felt familiar. The station I usually listened to was cupped out of Phoenix. Anyone who has driven around central Arizona probably knows the feeling of tracking distance by radio signal. The closer you get to Phoenix, the clearer it gets. The farther you move away, the more static crawls in. It is not a perfect system, but after a while, your ears learn it. That evening, something about the signal was strange. It should have been getting better as I drove toward Phoenix. Instead, it was getting worse. At first, it was just a little fuzz around the edges of the music. Then the voices started thinning out. Then the static grew thicker, like dry sand being poured over the speakers. I turned the volume up, then down, then reached toward the radio to fiddle with the dial. Even though I knew that station by heart, I figured maybe the antenna connection was acting up. My work truck had done weird things before. Nothing about the radio felt like a warning yet. It was only annoying. Then I saw the smoke. It was up ahead on the shoulder, rising heavy and black into the evening sky. At first, I thought it might be a brush fire. That would not be unusual out there, especially in June. Dry grass and careless people are a bad combination. But as I got closer, I could see the smoke was coming from a vehicle. A car had gone off the road. It was a brown sedan, or at least it looked like one, flipped upside down in the ditch beside the interstate. The shoulder was torn up where it had left the road. Fresh marks cut through the gravel. A section of fence nearby was bent flat. The dirt around the car looked churned and disturbed, like the vehicle had rolled several times before landing where it was. Thick black smoke rose from it in a dark column, standing out sharply against the orange light of sunset. I looked around for other cars. There were none. No one ahead of me, no one behind me. The interstate felt empty in both directions, which happens sometimes out there, but not usually for long. Still, at that moment, it felt like I was the only person for miles. I started slowing down. That is what most people would do. You see a wreck, you slow down. You check if someone needs help. You call it in. You look for people. I was already reaching for the hazard lights, already thinking about whether I had gloves in the truck, already trying to judge if the car was on fire or just smoking. As I came closer, though, something about the wreck felt wrong. Not wrong enough to make me drive away. Not at first, just wrong enough that I remember noticing it. The car looked simplified. That is the best word I can use. It looked like a car in the way a toy car looks like a car. The overall shape was right. The size was right. The color was right. But the details were strange, like someone had made a copy of a car from memory and left out the small things that make a real car real. The side mirrors seemed oddly hollow, almost bent inward instead of shaped properly. The door seams were too clear, too raised, like lines pressed into clay. The windows were dark, but not in the normal way. And even though the car had supposedly just rolled off the highway and crashed into the dirt, I could not see the damage I expected. No crushed roof, no shattered glass glittering everywhere, no mangled panels, no dust caked across the sides. It looked strangely clean for a car that had just been thrown into an Arizona ditch. The smoke bothered me too. It was not coming from the engine area. It was not coming from underneath the vehicle. It seemed to be rising from the entire car at once, like the whole thing was producing smoke evenly from every surface. I am not a car expert, but I have seen enough roadside trouble to know that is not how smoke usually works. Still, I was almost stopped by then. It is hard to ignore a possible emergency, even when something feels strange. I told myself I was tired. I told myself the sunset light was playing tricks on me. I told myself wrecked cars can look weird from certain angles. And most of all, I told myself there might be someone trapped inside. Then a man came out from behind the overturned car. He stepped into view fast, waving both arms. "Hey," he shouted. "Hey, please." He started jogging toward my truck. His movements were hurried and desperate. He kept looking back over his shoulder at the car, then back at me. "My wife," he yelled. His voice cracked like he was about to break down. "She's trapped inside. Please, help me." That was enough to make me pull fully onto the shoulder. Because what are you supposed to do in that moment? Keep driving? Tell yourself the whole thing looks strange and leave a woman to burn? People like to think they would trust their instincts every time. But instincts are not always simple. Sometimes one instinct tells you danger, and another tells you someone needs help. That second instinct is powerful. It is the one that makes you open a door when you should lock it. The man was about 50 feet away when I put the truck in park. He kept coming closer, still pleading, still waving. I looked past him toward the flipped car. Part of me was already preparing for the next few minutes. I thought I might have to crawl through broken glass. I thought I might have to pull someone out through a window. I thought there might be blood, screaming, fire. I was trying to become calm before I had to do something ugly. But the closer I looked, the more the car seemed wrong. There were no flames, no heat shimmer, no orange glow inside the smoke, no black scorch marks on the ground, and there was no smell of burning rubber, fuel, or hot metal. With that much smoke, I should have smelled something. Even through a closed window, even with the truck's air running, there should have been a hint of it. But I smelled only dust, stale ack, and the inside of my truck. The smoke kept rising anyway. The man reached my door and put one hand near the window. He did not bang on it. He did not touch the glass. He just stood there with his face close enough that I could see him properly. "Please," he said. "I can't get her out." His voice sounded terrified. It had all the right breaks in it. All the right panic. The kind of voice that should have made me throw my door open without thinking. But his face did not match. That is the part I remember most clearly. The expression was there, technically. His eyebrows were raised. His eyes were wide. His mouth was tight in a shape that looked like fear. But it was not working together. It did not look like real panic. It looked like someone had studied panic and then tried to copy it without understanding what fear feels like from the inside. Like a mask, like a mannequin, arranged to look frightened. I sat there with my hand on the door handle. My thumb rested against the latch. I remember the texture of the plastic under my fingers. I remember the faint static still hissing from the radio. I remember the sky going darker at the edges while the desert held that last orange light. The man kept staring at me. "Sir," he said, still using that panicked voice. "Please." I looked at him. I looked at the car. I looked at the empty highway behind me. My mind started offering explanations, one after another. Maybe he had some kind of facial condition. Maybe he had been injured and was in shock. Maybe the car was foreign and built strangely. Maybe the light was distorting everything. Maybe his wife really was trapped inside, and every second I waited made it worse. But my body did not believe any of those explanations. Every nerve in me wanted to put the truck in gear and leave. Then the wind shifted. A hard gust swept across the highway. Dust ran over the pavement in quick little streams. Dry bits of grass shook along the shoulder. The black smoke bent sideways. And that was when I saw two things. The first thing was the smoke. It did not behave like smoke. Real smoke tears apart in wind. It thins, it curls, it breaks into messy ribbons. This smoke did not do that. The whole column simply leaned in one direction, still thick, still whole, still holding its shape, like a flag, like a sheet of black cloth. The second thing was the man's eyes. The gust threw dust straight into his face. Some of it hit him in the eyes. He flinched and blinked. But his blink was wrong. His upper eyelids did not move. His lower eyelids rose upward. For 1 second, his eyes closed from the bottom, like a reptile. My brain refused to understand it at first. I stared at him through the window, trying to replay what I had seen. I wanted it to become normal if I thought about it hard enough. Maybe it was a trick of the light. Maybe I had only caught the end of a blink. Maybe he had squinted. Maybe I was tired from work and the long drive. But I knew what I saw. The man's eyes opened again, the same wrong way, lowering from the top of the eye shape while the bottom lids dropped back into place. Then we just looked at each other. Neither of us moved. The panic drained from his face. It did not fade like a person calming down. It disappeared like something turned off. His eyebrows relaxed, his mouth loosened. The fake fear left him, and what replaced it was worse. Curiosity, almost amusement. He looked at me the way a person might look at a dog that had learned how to open a locked door. Then he slowly tilted his head. Not much, just enough. He stepped away from my window and walked around toward the front of the truck, never taking his eyes off me. There was no hurry now, no begging, no shaking hands, no desperate husband trying to save his wife. When he spoke again, his voice was calm. "Get out of the vehicle," he said. His tone was polite. That made it worse. "Now, please." Movement near the overturned car pulled my eyes away from him. The passenger door had opened. Something was climbing out. At first, I thought it really was a person hurt in the crash. A woman, maybe, dragging herself out of the wreck. The shape moved like a body that had been badly injured, bent wrong, twisted, one leg dragging, shoulders crooked, hair hanging over the face. It pulled itself out of the upside-down car and stood in the ditch, swaying. For a moment, it looked broken. Then it started walking toward me. With each step, it became less broken. The limp faded. The bent legs straightened. The shoulders corrected. The awkward dragging movement smoothed out into a normal walk, as if whatever was inside that shape was learning how to use it properly. The hair stayed hanging over its face, thick and tangled, hiding everything. It walked toward my truck with steady, careful steps. I looked back at the man in front of me. He was smiling now. Not a big smile. Not a human smile. Just a tight little pull at the corners of his mouth, stretched across a face that had no other feeling in it. His eyes stayed wide and still. His lower lids looked normal again, but I could not stop seeing the way they had moved. My hand left the door handle and went to the gear shift. The man noticed. His smile widened slightly. I put the truck in drive. The creature from the wreck kept coming closer. The man took one step toward the front of my truck, still blocking my way. Maybe he thought I would not do it. Maybe whatever he was did not understand panic any better than it understood how to fake a face. Maybe he knew exactly what I would do and wanted to see it happen. I floored it. The truck jumped forward. For one terrible second, his smiling face stayed visible above the hood. Then it disappeared beneath the front of the truck. There was a heavy impact underneath me, a hard thump followed by a jolt that rocked the whole vehicle. Something scraped along the bottom. The truck bounced once, then kept moving. I did not touch the brakes. I did not look back right away. My foot stayed pressed down. The engine roared. Gravel sprayed behind me as I pulled fully back onto the highway. I expected hands on the truck. I expected something to hit the rear window. I expected the radio to scream or the engine to die or the road ahead to vanish. Nothing happened. When I finally looked in the rearview mirror, the man was standing in the middle of the highway. Standing, perfectly upright, not broken, not bleeding, not even leaning. He watched me drive away as if I had never hit him at all. The other thing stood near the ditch beside the brown sedan, its hair still covering its face. Neither of them chased me. They just watched until the road curved and I could not see them anymore. I drove faster than I should have, all the way back toward Phoenix. The radio was nothing but static for a long time. I turned it off because every crackle made my skin crawl. My hands were shaking so badly that I had to grip the wheel hard to keep the truck steady. I kept checking the mirrors. Every few seconds, I expected to see headlights behind me, or a dark figure standing in the road, or that brown car flipped on the shoulder again like the whole scene had somehow moved ahead of me. But I made it back. I did not call the police that night. I know that sounds bad. Maybe I should have. But what was I supposed to say? I ran over a man who stood up afterward. There was a fake car crash on I-17 with smoke that moved like cloth. A woman with hair over her face crawled out of a wreck and learned to walk. Even if someone believed me enough to send a unit, what would they find? I already knew the answer before I went back. Still, the next morning, I drove the same route. I had to know. It was daylight when I got there. The desert looked normal again. Too normal. The same tan dirt. The same brush. The same long highway. I slowed down at the spot where I was sure it had happened. I recognized the curve. I recognized the stretch of shoulder. I recognized the fence line. There was nothing there. No overturned brown sedan, no broken fence, no torn up gravel, no tire tracks in the dirt, no scorch marks, no sign that anything had ever left the road. I pulled over and sat there for a while, staring at the empty ditch. Cars passed now and then, shaking my truck slightly with the wind of their speed. The sun was already hot. The whole place looked ordinary. Boring, save that almost made it worse. Because I knew what I had seen. I still work in microwave communications. I still drive long distances. I still take I-17 when the job sends me that way. You do not stop doing your job because the desert showed you something impossible once. Bills keep coming. Work orders keep arriving. Towers still go down. But I do things differently now. I do not stop for smoke unless I can see real fire. I do not get out until I have called emergency services. I do not trust empty roads at sunset. And I do not listen to local radio on those drives anymore. I pay for Spotify now. That might sound stupid, but I cannot stand static anymore. I cannot stand that soft hiss when a station starts to fade. Because sometimes, when the signal gets bad and the speakers fill with that dry, crackling noise, I feel like I can hear a voice hiding inside it. A panicked voice. A perfect copy of fear. Help me, it says. Please, Story 5. So you want to catch monsters? Marcus paused after saying it, like he was waiting for thunder to roll through the room. He held a flashlight under his chin, making his face look long and hollow. The light threw strange shadows up his cheeks and under his eyes, and for a second he looked less like a skinny high school kid and more like something that had crawled out of a grave. Skylar, Red, and I sat on the floor in front of him, all three of us caught and annoyed. We were supposed to be having a sleepover at Red's house, but we had not planned on sleeping. We had planned on sneaking out to the abandoned train yard to catch palm predators on our phones. The train yard was a creepy old place where no adults wanted us to go, which made it perfect for monster hunting. At least, that was what we had thought before Red got scared, started whispering for us to turn back, and got us caught by his sister Katie. Katie was our sleepover sitter for the night. She had started the whole thing like a normal scolding. She told us we could have gotten hurt. She told Skylar and me that our parents would be hearing about our behavior. She said Red should have known better. It was the kind of lecture adults give when they want to sound serious, but are mostly just relieved they caught you before anything bad happened. Then Marcus, Katie's boyfriend, decided to make it worse. He turned our time out into a horror show. Marcus was thin, almost bony, with long arms and a sharp face. In normal light, he just looked like one of those older teenagers who thought being creepy made him cool. But with a flashlight under his chin and the house dark around us, he looked terrifying. His eyes were hidden in shadow, and when he smiled, it made my stomach feel tight. "Have you ever heard of the toe-bitter?" he asked. Skylar rolled her eyes right away. Red did not. Red pulled his knees closer to his chest. "I know all about monsters," Marcus said. His voice had gone low and slow. "I know about the monster you should actually be afraid of. You can go running around outside trying to catch little fake monsters on your phones if you want, but there are real things out there. Real things that catch kids. I know about the toe-bitter." Katie stood near the doorway with her arms crossed. Every now and then, she looked at Marcus and gave him a nervous smile, like she thought he was being silly, but also did not want him to stop. Maybe she thought it would scare us enough to keep us from sneaking out again. Maybe she thought it was funny. Marcus lowered his voice even more. "The toe-bitter sneaks into kids' bedrooms at night," he said. "Do you know why? That's not scary," Skylar said at once. Marcus did not even look bothered. "The toe-bitter is all around," he said. "Why do you think your parents tell you to tuck the sheets under the end of the bed? Why do you think they say not to let your feet hang out? My mom does that because she doesn't want the cat getting under the covers," Skylar said. Marcus smiled. Brave, so brave. And sure, there are lots of good reasons to tuck in your sheets. But loose feet are dangerous. Toes hanging just over the edge of the bed are like a gift, a target. The toe-bitter likes little kids who stay up too late. It likes kids who sneak out. It likes kids who are too tired the next night to protect themselves. Red swallowed so loudly I could hear it. Marcus leaned forward, and I promise you, it does not matter if all 10 of your little toes are tucked under blankets. If it has chosen you, blankets will not stop it. Red's voice shook when he asked, "What does the toe-bitter look like?" Marcus was quiet for a moment, enjoying the fear. "I think it looks a little different to every kid," he said, "but once you see it, it has definitely seen you. Then it starts choosing. It goes after whoever is the most tired. It gives you little hints before it comes. Maybe not the first night, maybe not even the second, but sooner or later your toes get ripe." Red's face went pale. "Ripe for biting?" Marcus laughed softly. "That is the thing. When it comes for you in bed, biting is only the beginning." "Okay," Skylar said, sitting up straighter. Her voice was sharp now. "This is bzz." "Skylar," Katie snapped. "Don't say that. Does your mom let you talk like that? It is bees, Skylar said. You caught us. Fine. Game over. Now let us go to sleep. Marcus spoke over Katie before she could answer. Okay, go to sleep. But really, sleep. Don't stay awake all night. Don't keep playing games under the covers. Don't whisper. Don't watch the dark. Because if you do, the toe-bitter might notice. And trust me, any meeting with the toe-bitter will stay with you for the rest of your life. After that, Skylar stood up like she was too annoyed to be scared, and Red slowly followed. I went with them up the tall wooden stairs to Red's bedroom. As I climbed, I ran my hand along the banister without thinking. Don't do that, Skylar said behind me. You'll get another splinter. I pulled my hand away fast. I hated splinters. I hated the way they hid under your skin. I hated having to dig them out with tweezers. And I hated it even more when my mom made me soak my hand in Epsom salt for ages until my fingers felt wrinkled and waterlogged. From downstairs, I heard Marcus chuckle and tell Katie that he had bought them some fun time. I did not understand what was so fun about sitting on a couch together. At our age, that was still peak cootie season, and none of us could imagine wanting to sit that close to anyone on purpose. Red kept looking around as we walked down the dark hallway. His head moved left and right like he expected the toe-bitter to come sliding out of the walls right then. When Skylar stepped on a squeaky floorboard by accident, Red jumped so hard he almost bumped into me. Red, this is all your fault, Skylar said as soon as we got into his room. She climbed straight up to the top bunk of his bunk bed and turned on her phone. If you had not been whispering, go back the whole time we were trying to sneak out, I would have caught a rock dragon by now. Now all I can get in your stupid house is bug rats. I already have enough bug rats. Well, it's better than letting the toe-bitter catch us, Red said. There is no such thing as the toe-bitter, Skylar and I said at the same time. Skylar pointed at Red. I can prove it, how? I asked. We stay up all night, she said, like we were planning to do anyway. If we do not see anything, then we know it is fake. Red looked at the floor. I don't think I can sleep now, anyway. So that was what we did. We stayed awake. At first, we played on our phones and whispered about how stupid Marcus was. Then we started talking about other schoolyard legends. Bloody Mary in the mirror. The hookman scratching at a car door. The killer who hides under the bed and licks your fingers like a dog. We told the stories in low voices, scaring each other and then laughing, because we did not want to admit we were scared. The minutes crawled by. Midnight passed. Then the clock moved closer and closer to 1 in the morning, which felt impossible to us at that age. Being awake at 1 in the morning felt like breaking a law of nature. By then, we had started to feel proud of ourselves. No toe-bitter had come. No monster had crawled under the bed. No whispers had come from the closet. Finally, all three of us agreed the story was fake and decided to sleep. Skylar had full control of the top bunk. Red slept on the bottom bunk, still wrapped up tight in his blankets. I curled up on a small 2-seat couch in the corner of the room. Even though we had all said the toe-bitter was not real, we each made sure our feet were covered under several blankets. I woke up sweating when sunlight hit my face. For a second, I did not remember where I was. Then I saw the bunk bed, the toys on the floor, and the posters on Red's walls. I had kicked most of my blankets off during the night. My feet were hanging over the armrest of the little couch, completely uncovered. I stared at them for a moment. Then I told myself I was being stupid. It was already morning. Nothing had happened. My feet were hot, and I did not want the blankets anymore. Skylar was still asleep on the top bunk, but Red was gone. I sat up and looked around the room. Red? I whispered. No answer. I woke Skylar. She was slow and grumpy at first, but when I told her Red was missing, she climbed down the ladder. We searched the room, then the hall. It did not take long to find him. He was in the bathroom, crouched between the toilet and the bathtub. Every light was on. When we opened the door, he screamed so loudly that it hurt my ears. He looked wild. His curly hair hung over his face, and only his wide, searching eyes showed through it. He screamed, cried, and tried to talk all at once until he ran out of breath. Then he tried to stand and stumbled into the sink. He saw the toe bitter, huh? I jumped. Skylar did not. Marcus was leaning against the bathroom doorway, eating an apple like this was all entertainment. Now do you believe me? He asked between loud bites. Skylar spun toward him. What did you do to him, Marcus? Why did you scare him this bad? My mom is going to hear that you went into our room last night. Marcus lifted his eyebrows. I did nothing of the sort, Red wheezed. I saw it. It wasn't Marcus, no, Skylar said firmly. It was him. He probably put on a Halloween costume or something. Too bad I did not wake up, because I would have punched him where the sun doesn't shine. Or, I said, because I really needed to use the bathroom and did not want to run downstairs like a baby, maybe you had a bad nightmare. Red shook his head hard. It can hide in the light, he said. It is probably still here. Skylar glared at Marcus. I looked around the bathroom, even though I did not want to. Marcus raised both hands, still chewing his apple, and walked backward down the hall. After that, everything got loud. Skylar was angry. Red was crying. Katie came upstairs. Adults got called. Eventually, Skylar's parents came to pick her up early, and I had my parents come get me too. It was Sunday by then. Skylar and I messaged each other later, but we did not hear from Red. We told ourselves he would be at school on Monday, and we would make fun of him until he stopped acting weird. But Red did not show up. Skylar and I did not have classes together that Monday, but we had the same lunch period. I saw her in the cafeteria right away. Red was not there. We both texted him again and again, but he did not answer. Then Skylar showed me a picture. It was her shower door, fogged up from steam. Written in the condensation were 4 small letters. Angst, I stared at the image. You next, I whispered, understanding it before I wanted to. I did not see anything, Skylar said. Her voice was quieter than usual. If Marcus was right, I have to see it for it to see me. Nothing happened all night, except when Red freaked out. I did not see that. All I saw was you getting up to go to the bathroom. I spit out my milk and froze with my hands gripping my lunch tray. What do you mean? Skylar blinked. You got up. I saw you. I did not get up all night, I said. My throat felt tight. I thought I saw you climb down from the bed. I did not, she said. I am too short to jump from the top bunk. If I did not use the ladder, I would probably break my ankle. Well, I definitely did not go to the bathroom, I said, because I held it all night. Because I was scared. Skylar's face changed. For the first time, she looked unsure. I looked at the picture again. Angst, I think we need to visit Red after school, I said. Skylar nodded. We rode our bikes to Red's house after school. When we got there, Katie and Marcus were sitting on the porch swing, holding hands. Katie saw us and stood up. She walked through a pile of dry leaves to meet us in the yard. Marcus stayed on the porch wearing a leather jacket and round, smoky sunglasses, looking like he thought he was in a movie. Katie told us Red was sick. She said he was in a lot of pain and could not walk. Marcus smiled from the porch. You wanted to catch monsters, he said. Now you will see what happens when monsters catch us. Katie turned and flipped him off. Marcus burst out laughing. Then she looked back at us. I'm sorry he is still carrying on with this joke. I am sure my brother will be fine in a few days, okay? He would probably love to hear from you by text or video chat. "I do not know what you see in him," Skylar said as we got back on our bikes. We rode away, but we did not go straight home. We went to the abandoned train yard and played Palm Predators for a while. It felt normal for a little bit, like if we kept playing and joking, the fear would shrink. We tried to contact Red at least 6 more times, but he never answered. It was getting late, around 7:30, when we split up and went home. I ate dinner, did some homework, and almost convinced myself that everything was just Marcus messing with us. Maybe Red had stepped on something. Maybe he had hurt his feet. Maybe Skylar's shower message was a prank. Then I got a video chat notice from Red. It was a group call to Skylar and me. I answered. Red's camera showed the fire pit in his backyard. It was made from a ring of cinder blocks. The image shook badly because Red was sobbing. He seemed to be crawling with one hand toward the pit. His breathing came in broken little gasps. He reached for one of the blocks and struggled to lift it. "I have to do it," he cried. "They won't stop. They're cracking. They're hatching like eggs." The camera tilted down. His bare feet were pressed together over the edge of one of the cinder blocks. His toes hung out in a row. "Red, no," I shouted, but I do not think he heard me. He lifted another cinder block above his feet. Then, from above the camera frame, he brought it down. The scream that came from him did not sound like anything a person should make. It was pure pain, raw and horrible. The camera dropped into the ashes. I heard Katie screaming. I heard Red's mom shouting. Then the feed cut out. Before I could even speak to Skylar, who was still connected, my dad called from the hallway. "Lights out." I yelled that I needed a minute, but he warned me that if I argued, he would take my phone. I shut it off, hoping I could text Skylar later under the covers. But I could not reach her for the rest of the night. The next morning, there was still nothing from Skylar. I walked into the kitchen half awake and saw the letter magnets on the fridge. My little siblings used them all the time, so they were always scattered around in weird patterns. But that morning, 4 letters had been placed neatly in a row. UNXT. My mouth went dry. I did not say anything for the rest of the morning. I skipped breakfast and wanted nothing more than to get out of the house. At school, Skylar was not in art class. She was not at lunch either. I sat alone, sending frantic texts to both her and Red. I sent message after message. I called. I waited. Nothing. The whole day passed in a blur. Every class felt unreal. The teachers talked, but I barely heard them. All I could think about was going home, going to bed, and getting tired. That was what Marcus had said. It went after whoever was the most tired. By dinner, I could not eat. I must have sent 100 texts and calls to Red and Skylar by then. Finally, Skylar started sending messages back. But they were only pictures. The first picture was blurry and overexposed. It showed her toes. The second showed her hand holding a large pair of heavy metal kitchen scissors. The third picture made me drop my phone. On her carpet, written in blood, were the words, "Get them out." Beside the words were 4 bloody stumps where toes should have been. I ran out of the house without thinking. I grabbed my bike and rode to Skylar's house as fast as I could. The autumn air was cold, but I was sweating hard by the time I got there. I arrived just in time to see an ambulance pulling away from her house, lights flashing. My phone exploded with calls and texts from my parents asking where I was and why I was not home for dinner. I rode back through the dark as fast as I could. My head kept turning in every direction, watching the yards, the trees, the sidewalk, the shadows under parked cars. When I got home, my parents were furious. My phone was taken away as punishment, and I was sent to bed early. I went to my room and stripped the covers from my bed. Then I tucked them back in as tightly as I could. I pushed the sheets deep under the mattress at the foot of the bed. I checked every corner. I checked under the bed. I checked the closet. I was ready for anything, but also ready for nothing. Because Skylar had been ready too. Skylar was the toughest person I knew, and it had still gotten her. I was exhausted. I had barely slept for days. The bike rides, the fear, the images of Red crushing his feet and Skylar cutting at her toes, all of it had worn me down. My body wanted sleep, even while my mind screamed at me to stay awake. I lay in the dark and watched the foot of my bed. A line of light came through the crack under my door, and I kept staring at it, waiting for something to pass across it. When my eyes got tired, I looked at the closet door, especially the long handle. Then I looked at my dresser. The knobs always made me nervous, because in the dark they looked a little like eyes. Finally, I pulled the sheets over my head and listened. I was almost asleep when I heard something brush against the far side of my bed. Something moved. Panic hit me so hard that I launched myself across the room with my comforter wrapped around me like a net. I screamed for my dad as loud as I could. The comforter fell harmlessly to the floor, catching nothing. Then, Rusty, our tortie cat, popped up on the bed. All the fear rushed out of me at once. I almost laughed. It was just the cat. I pulled the comforter back over myself, hot and sweaty and shaking, and tried to get comfortable again. I pushed my head into my pillows, and that was when I felt something strange. There was a small gap between my headboard, the bed frame, and the wall. Sometimes pillows got stuck there. But this time, I felt a mass in the gap. It was cold, like meat straight from the refrigerator. The mass moved. It slid upward behind the headboard, climbing the wall. I turned onto my back and looked up. A smoky shadow, darker than the rest of the room, snaked across the ceiling. It moved like mist, but had weight to it. It traveled above me, then dropped down at the foot of my bed. It became a long, shaking tube-like shape that stretched from the floor nearly to the ceiling, just outside the thin beam of light from the door. My eyes moved slowly up its almost transparent body. It was hard to see where it began or ended. At the top was something like a flower, but not a flower. It had strange, uneven, teardrop-shaped petals floating between an oval and a circle. Each petal folded into a long worm-like shape, then opened again like a little fan. At the end of each one, I could see a thin needlepoint. Then I saw the eyes. They were human eyes, or close to human. They bobbed and swayed on top of the smoky body as if they were attached to springs. They did not look in the same direction. They were tilted wrong, unfocused, empty, and cruel. They looked human and not human at the same time. I could not move. I could not scream. The tobiter hung there and seemed to study me. It felt like it was enjoying my fear, cutting it open and looking through it piece by piece. I heard footsteps in the hallway. My bedroom door opened a crack. For 1 second, the light made the creature vanish. Rusty ran out through the crack in the door. Then the door began to swing shut again. As the room grew dark, the tobiter reappeared. I took a breath, ready to scream for my dad. I knew he would hear me this time. But the tobiter moved first. The bottom of its tube-like body opened wide, like a parachute falling over the foot of my bed. Its outline melted into the pattern of my comforter. Then it moved through the fabric toward me like a worm tunneling through sand. The blanket grew heavy. Cold pressure spread over my legs, my chest, my face. I could not breathe right. I could not move. I was frozen in terror and burning with sweat at the same time. Then I heard its voice inside my head. It sounded like millions of tiny insect voices speaking together. I bit your toes 2 days ago. I woke up screaming, My mom and dad were at my door, and sunlight was pouring through the windows. But I could still feel pressure on my face, chest, and toes. As my parents rushed to my bed, the feeling slipped away from me like wet cloth sliding off skin. My whole body felt waterlogged, except for my toes. My toes felt like frozen pebbles. I sat up, gasping and coughing until I threw up a little. My parents decided I was staying home from school. Any other day, I would have been happy to miss school. That morning, I did not care. I knew I was on a countdown. I was on a timer like Red, like Skylar. When I woke up, my toes were exposed off the edge of the bed. I could not feel them properly, and it hurt to walk or wiggle them. I put on socks, but after a while they began to feel wrong. They throbbed with pain. Each toe felt like a giant popcorn kernel about to burst. I asked my parents if they saw anything strange about my toes. They both said they looked fine. By midday, I had to take my socks off. My toes felt like they were swelling inside them. When I looked, I saw them expanding and shrinking, like a frog's throat moving as it breathes. The color shifted, too, from pale yellow to green and then almost back to normal pink. I walked on my heels to keep my toes from touching the carpet. I showed my mom again. She said they looked fine and told me to rest. Rest was impossible. Just thinking about my bedroom made my heart jump into my throat. But then I remembered my illegal firecrackers hidden in there. The thought of blowing off my toes started to seem reasonable. Anything felt better than having 10 little painful things attached to my feet, swelling and moving like they were not mine. I went into the bathroom and turned on the bright light. That was when I saw into my toes. They were almost translucent, like frog eggs. Inside each one, something small moved. At first, I could barely make out the shape, but as I watched, I understood. Each toe held a tiny version of the toe bitter. 10 more monsters were growing inside me. The pain surged, and I realized that soon I might not be able to climb the stairs to get my firecrackers. I started up, gripping the banister like a rope and pulling myself along. About 3/4 of the way up, my hand slipped across a rough spot, and I got a splinter. A tiny piece of wood stuck in the top layer of my skin. For one crazy second, I thought, great, now I have to blow my hand off too, because I would rather do that than soak it in Epsom salt and dig it out with tweezers. Then I had an idea. I hurried the rest of the way upstairs and went into the bathroom. I turned the hot water on full blast and plugged the drain. I dumped the rest of the Epsom salt into the nearly boiling water. Steam rose up and hit my face. I grabbed a towel, bit down on it, and took 2 deep breaths. Then I put my feet into the scalding water. The heat was awful. I shook and cried through my teeth, but I kept my feet in. After a few minutes, bright yellow pus began to ooze from under each toenail. 10 thin streams leaked into the water, and the smell made me gag. Then black, wiggling tails pushed out from beneath my nails. Each one came with a sharp stabbing pain that somehow felt worse than the hot water. The tails grew longer and thicker. Soon my toes looked like tadpoles. Then smoky gray, meaty worm-like things began pushing out of my waterlogged feet. I grabbed tweezers from the medicine cabinet. One by one, I dug under each toenail and squeezed the whole creature out. I do not know how I did it without passing out. I only know that fear made me stronger than pain. When the last one came free, I pulled the plug. I watched those 10 tiny things swirl down the drain. My toes slowly returned to a more normal shape and color. They still burned, but it was a normal burn. A human burn. I left the bathroom shaking, feverish, soaked with sweat, and completely exhausted. My mom met me in the hallway. She looked confused. Did you take a bath and then put your clothes back on without drying off? That was when I fainted. A few days passed. The fever went away. My toes were burned, but they were still there. The doctors said I would probably not have long-term damage. My mind was a different story. I could barely sleep. I met up with Red and Skylar after they were released from psychiatric observation. Both of them had serious injuries. Both had lost several toes. I told them everything that had happened to me, and then I convinced them we needed to confront Marcus. At first, we were afraid he would be gone, like the toe-bitter had vanished in the light. We had started to think maybe he was the toe-bitter. Maybe he had brought it to us. Maybe he had chosen us. Skylar even brought her bead gun when we went to find him. But when we cornered Marcus and accused him, he looked more scared than guilty. He pleaded with us. He said he could not run. Then, he slipped off his boots. He had prosthetic toes mixed with badly mangled real ones. He was not the toe-bitter. He was another victim. Years earlier, he said, he had cut off his own toes with a board shear in art class because of the same thing. He said he had tried to warn us in the only way he knew how. Maybe he had enjoyed scaring us too much, but he had still tried. A week later, things were almost normal again. Then one morning, I sat at the breakfast table and noticed the fridge magnets. The letters had been arranged in a new message. Thanks for not clang my beebs. Thanks for not killing my babies. So that was that. Compared to Red, Skylar, and Marcus, I got away almost untouched. I kept my toes. I survived. But I also helped send young toe-bitters into the world. I watched them go down the drain and thought they were gone, but now I am not sure where that drain led, or what they became, or who they will find next. I am in high school now. I go to therapy, and writing this down is part of it. My therapist says I have survivor's guilt. She says our minds can connect fear, pain, and stories in powerful ways. She says what happened to us may have been a physical response to panic and mass hysteria. But I know the truth. The toe-bitter is real. I cannot sleep with the lights off. I cannot let my feet hang over the bed. I still tuck my sheets so tightly that my mattress corners tear. And every night, just before I fall asleep, I wonder what other monsters live in that strange place between waking and dreaming, waiting for tired, brave, foolish kids to notice them.